Good evening, welcome. This evening, I'm going to be chatting with Pete Bangs, finding out a little bit more about him and his life and his faith. So, thanks for coming along.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
It's cool. Yeah, so a few of us know Pete. Pete's been involved in Elemental, I think, basically since the first one, I think.
Yeah, been there since the first year.
And now works across the circuit, but I will get him to explain all about that later on. But that's kind of a bit about as how I met him. I think I met you the very first time I met you was after a Pioneer connection meeting in Southampton. David Moss took me with him, and we went and we had a coffee in Central Hall. You and David were talking very animatedly about Wickham and Elemental, and I enjoyed a really good coffee.
Yeah, so probably should have drawn you into the conversation more at the time, I think.
No, that's fine. I enjoyed the coffee. So anyway, so that's all right. So let's find out a bit about you to start with. So where do you come from? Where's home for you?
Well, I've not been a big traveller, unlike some people. I was born in Netley, lived in Butlocks, which is about half a mile away, moved as far as Thornhill for a brief period, which was another mile away, and now I'm in Bitton. So I've never gone particularly far. I've always been sort of on that eastern outskirt of Southampton my entire life.
Well, I was born in Bitton, so there you go. So
it's a good place.
I was born in my grandparents' house in Bitton. So, well, that's interesting. So, how about early years, sort of schooling and all of that kind of stuff? What were you up to?
Well, where I lived in Butlocks, it was still very much rural at the time. The woman across the road kept pigs, and she used to send those off to the yard every so often. So we'd end up chasing them up and down the street, trying to get them in the back of the van for her. There was a big woodland over the back of our garden and a pig farm. So it was quite a sort of idyllic rural time, really, getting chased by cows and things like that. The local school was literally 2 minutes walk up the road from where I lived. Didn't really care that much for school, I've got to be honest, and didn't do that well, but it was a good way to live, really.
And then, so I guess that was like an infant or primary school in Butlocks. Where did you go?
Primary
school. Secondary school?
There was a primary school. Well, it was an infant school and a primary school, and then they moved the primary part of it to Netley, and then I ended up at secondary school in Hamble, which was probably not the best of things. It's one of those areas I like to gloss over, usually.
Okay, so we'll gloss over that. So, what did you do then after school? What?
When I was at school, my big ambition was to become an animator. So I went on to Barton Peveril College and took art and English and a variety of other bits and pieces that I thought would be useful. And then I met with the wonderful careers advisor who went, yeah, if you want to be an animator, you'll have to move to California and join Walt Disney. At which point I felt totally crushed and pretty much gave up. If I'd been a little more on the ball at that point and done some research, I'd have realized that there was something, I mean, this is early to mid 80s, there was something like 40 animation companies between Brighton and London along that stretch there where they were crying out for people at the time. I mean, a lot of the companies along there were involved in things like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So Yeah, I mean, that kind of derailed me completely from what my plan had been at the time. And I ended up doing all sorts of jobs after that. So it
Anything
was,
memorable from those jobs? Anything?
well, my first job coming out of college was with Tesco's. The Tesco's at Burslem, which was just up the road from us, was having a large extension done. And I ended up working from 1 in the afternoon till 10 at night in the warehouse, because the warehouse at that point was this sort of 3-story corrugated tin monstrosity, and all the little old ladies that stacked shelves couldn't get anything higher up. So I spent nearly 2 years just sort of swinging around like a monkey, really, just grabbing boxes of stuff and dropping them down to them. But I sort of eventually moved on from there. Probably my favourite job from the early part of my time was working in internal comms, internal communications for British Gas. Had a great manager, let me do all sorts of things, and it's where I really learned about writing, being able to sort of figure out who your audience was, so you knew who you were writing for, and just stuff about communication, which probably I wouldn't really have had a chance to pick up anywhere else.
Oh wow! And then where did you go after that sort of period? What's
After that, I kind of bounced backwards and forwards between a few other jobs, nothing really memorable. And then I ended up working in communications for First Bus Company, which was a fabulous job because nobody really cared what you did. So you were just left to get on with it. So I did internal company newspapers, exterior sort of out-facing newsletters. We'd do the roundels for the prices that were the vinyls that went on the windows. I mean, that sort of thing was great fun. We'd have a price rise coming, and I'd go, right, I'm coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll strip all those buses. And then I'd come in at 2, and about 6:30, 7 o'clock, all the buses would be out, and I'd be going, right, I'm off home now. That's long enough for me. And nobody particularly cared, so it was great. And I got to do some strange things. We had a bus launch down in Portsmouth where they'd bought 3 brand new buses, and the directors decided they wanted them wrapped like a birthday present. And I said, have we got a budget for this? And they went, no. So I ended up scrounging together about a dozen great big dust sheets that we used in the garage, getting them sewn together. Well, they were actually stapled together, and then found some stuff in a different colour that I could use to make a big ribbon out of, and then clambered over the top of these buses, laying everything down so it looked like a big present. And I did that on a budget of next to nothing. So that's been one of the weird things about this job, is actually having a budget and having money to spend. I'm still not used to it 3 years in.
I was going to say, I mean, that was equipping you well for the church, but now you've just said you've got a budget. So yeah, and then some of us will know that you're married to Karen. So tell us a bit about how you two met, if you would.
Well, we met at British Gas, and Karen always tells everybody that her first memory of me was me coming up to her and her housemate in Marks and Spencer's and going to her housemate, hey, have you seen what's on the menu at work for tomorrow? They're offering God and chips. Which at the time I thought was hilarious, but at that point I wasn't a Christian, but I was working with her housemate, and she had literally just become a born-again Christian probably about 3 months before I met her. So she was very, very fervent. And we had a couple of young girls working with us, sort of 18, 19, who liked to go out and party, as young girls do. And she got into the habit of going, yeah, if you don't do something about that, you're just going to burn in hell. Which is always a great introduction, I think. So I ended up having some amazing conversations with her, though, because up to that point, I'd always been really interested in religions and things. I'd read the Bible 3 or 4 times by then, start to finish, which is not a way I recommend doing it to anybody. I'd read the Quran. I'd read a lot of Buddhist texts and things. So I had a good grounding in all sorts of things to be able to have a discussion with her and know what she was talking about. And although she really, really didn't win me over to Christ personally, I got to meet Karen through that, and we had a disastrous first date. And then the second date, it kind of was even more disastrous. Well, the first date, she said to me, "Oh, it's my birthday. Do you want to come down to the pub with us?" I went, "Great, come back and collect me when you're ready to go." But she insists I didn't say come back and collect me. So she went off down the pub with her mates. I sat there in the office thinking, where is she? And it wasn't until that was on the Saturday, it wasn't until the Monday that we realised that there'd been cross wires there. So the following Saturday, sorry.
I was going to say, at this time you work in internal communication, so...
No, it's not good, is it? And then the following Saturday, we decided we'd go out together, and we were both interested in art and things, and we thought we'd go to the Russell Coates Art Gallery in Bournemouth. And we got down there, and it was closed for renovations. And I said, "Oh, well, never mind. There's a really nice little sort of fish and chip restaurant around the corner. We'll go there, get something to eat." And we walked around the corner, and that was closed as well. And Karen's big memory of that second date is me standing in the middle of Bournemouth, banging my head against a lamppost in despair.
But obviously things took a more positive turn. And how long have you been married?
21 years this year. So yeah, eventually we thought we kind of got it together, and we were married after 6 months.
Right.
So from first date to wedding was 6 months, which was quite impressive.
Yeah, very good. And then so tell us about what you were doing sort of in the before some of us got to know you at the Elemental Tent. What was life like in that period of time?
Well, I sort of became a Christian through osmosis, really. It was, Karen was a Christian at the time, her family were Christians. I'd drop her at church and head off home again. And eventually I got to know the people and thought, oh, yeah, they're actually weird, but okay. And kind of going that way. And then I was working at First at the time, got made redundant just as we literally just had Harry, my youngest son. And we decided that we would have one of us stay at home to look after him. And since I had no job, I got that job instead. Anybody who ever says that looking after kids is an easy job is an idiot. It is the hardest job going, because it went from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. And it was incredible. It was wonderfully fulfilling. I mean, we'd do stupid things like we'd drop Molly at school, and then he'd spot the dust cart, and I'd push him round behind the dust cart in his pushchair just so he could watch it all the way round. So it had its ups and downs, but it was great. And then he eventually went to school, at which point I started looking for another job, and I ended up working as a support assistant for a autistic boy in a school in Southampton. And while I was doing that and having a absolutely fabulous and eye-opening time, I was about 2.5 years into that, and I got a call from David Moss, and he said, "We're putting out an advert for a missioner. I think you should apply." And I went, "Oh, okay then." So I did, and then ended up with all you lovely people.
So, going back to that osmosis time, can, can that's really interesting. I love that phrase. So, can you describe how? I don't know how you would describe yourself in that process. So, the recipient of osmosis or whatever. Yeah, tell us a bit about how that kind of played out for you.
Yeah, it was an interesting time because obviously a lot of Karen's friends that she knew were Christians because she was a regular at the church. She knew people from other places, other churches. So I knew an awful lot of Christians, and they were generally really nice people. And I kind of got into the habit. I'd sort of, while she was off at church, I'd have a flick through the Bible and read something, go back, pick her up. I went from sort of waiting for her outside to going in and talking to people. I'm told I looked rather scary because at the start I'd just sort of stand on one side of the room and scowl at people with this. Nobody was brave enough to come anywhere near me. But I got to know people, and I thought, well, if this is what being a Christian is about, it's okay. I'm quite happy. My thought at the time was I'm quite happy for the kids to be brought up like this. It never occurred to me that it was going to be something that was for me. And then Karen was away at work with work. She was in Newcastle of all places for a couple of 3 nights. I was at home, and she used to get these Kenneth Copeland magazines from Kenneth Copeland Ministries, and they actually were everything I disliked about Christianity. It was money focused, and it was all this sort of stuff, and I really didn't like it. But I was sat there one night, and I picked it up, and down the left-hand side of page 7, and I remember that perfectly, was the prayer of redemption. And I read this prayer, the prayer of salvation. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I read it again. I thought, yeah, I kind of get that. And then I read it again. And by about the 4th time of reading it through, I thought, yes, I mean this. Lord, save me. I'm a sinner. Save me. And Karen came back, and it completely slipped my mind to tell her any of this. And Sundays she went off to church, and I came home, and I would read the Bible and just investigate different things, pick up different books from different places. And about 2 years in, excuse me a second, we'd been invited by friends of hers to go to New Wine North East, or Northwest, whatever it was, I can't remember now. And she said to me, "Oh, we've been invited. What do you think?" I went, "Oh yes, let's go." And she looked stunned. And we were sat there one night, and we were talking with this guy Graham Seed, who was absolutely enormous. He was 6'7", about 6 foot wide at the shoulders, and he worked in prison ministry. And we were chatting away, and he turned to me. And he said, "Oh, what do you think of this, Pete?" And I went, "Well, I haven't been a Christian that long. I haven't been sort of following Christ that long, but," and then told him what I thought. And Karen's jaw just hit the ground and went, "You didn't tell me. When did this happen?" So, yeah, it was one of those things. But it was a slow feed.
So at what point in that then did you stop staying at home, as it were, and reading and joining in with where Karen was at church?
It
Did that?
was probably after that New Wine episode, because I had no excuse to stay home and read the Bible. Then I had to go to church.
And do you think did that maybe increased sense of belonging to the Sunday church? Was that helpful? Did you gain anything from doing that?
Um, I gotta say, the short answer is no. The long answer is that the church she was attending was an offshoot of another church that had, just trying to think of a polite way to put this, had basically grown out of a massive disagreement and things, and it was just like it was founded on poisoned earth. It just struggled and struggled, and people fought, and it was love. I mean, even the pastors that were running it, after 9 years, they just went, "We can't do it anymore. This is just too hard." And I started going on and off towards the end of that period, and then when they realised they couldn't keep going, they went, "Right, we're going to take our congregation and we're going to take them to New Community at West End, and we're going to become a part of that." So there was all this discussion going on in the background, and one week we were just told, "Oh, we'll be meeting at West End next week." So we all turned up there, met the pastors and the team that's still there now, and it kind of felt like home. It was, you'd never mistake it for a Methodist church. It was disorganized, fly by the seat of the pants, absolute mess most of the time. But the speakers they came in were really grounded in the Holy Spirit. The musicians were absolutely incredible, and I have to say that because one of them was my father-in-law. And it was just one of those places where it just felt like home. And I've kind of stuck with them since then. So this must be coming up, Harry's 12, so yeah, it'd be about 11 years now.
And obviously now that you meet at St Andrews in Sholing,
Yeah.
rather than in West End, is that the same congregation? Is that moved into a new building, or is that a different?
Well, initially it was the same congregation, but there were people who felt they were called specifically to West End and went back there fairly quickly. There were people who felt called elsewhere and went off in different places. There were people who got very upset about the idea they felt like they'd just been dumped on these people and deserted, so they left. And there are probably 3 of that original congregation that Karen was part of that are still with the church now. And there's probably been almost 100% turnover, I think, in terms of who's there now.
Okay.
But it just continues to grow as a real sort of family feeling church.
So as you're still, like all of us, really growing in your faith, and just what do you take most comfort from as a Christian? What is it, that keeps you going with this thing?
It's really interesting. I don't know about other people who come into faith relatively late in their lives, but I came into faith, didn't join an existing denomination, So there were no sort of set ways of doing things. So I kind of with no specific sort of setup in how things work, we were all basically finding our own way. I found this, my pineapple of prayer. Has a candle in the end. I noticed that one of the things that often happens is, for me at least, is I go, yeah, I'll pray for you. And then within 5 minutes, I've forgotten who I said that to. So a friend gave us this, and I write the names of people I'm praying for on small bits of paper that then go in there. So if I don't remember the person specifically, I pray for the people whose names I've got there. It's an odd little thing, but a lot of stuff I've kind of pulled together myself. I got very interested in Celtic prayer and Celtic Christianity, and there's a real sort of sense of peace that I get from a lot of that, from a lot of the night prayers and things. So it's been very much a case of sort of not finding what works for me, because that makes it sound like a pick and mix Christianity, but it's about finding a path that I can follow, that I can understand. Because I find that the actual chaos of somewhere like New Community, I really struggle with at times. I like the sort of denominational layout of introduction, prayer, hymn, prayer, speech, and so on. And that kind of setup, I find, actually works really well for me. But it's not something I've always got available to me, except now that I get to enjoy it online. But I've had to sort of, I say it's a really hard thing to explain, because it does make it sound like, oh, well, I like this bit of Christianity and that bit there and that bit there. But it's finding things that help me understand the Bible more than anything. So Celtic night prayer has been a real thing for me, in that it's enabled me to get through some fairly tough times recently. Having something to do with, when I say to people, yes, I'll pray for you, a way of keeping track of that, again, has been useful. So it's little things more than anything. And I think the other thing that I got from Celtic prayer and Celtic Christianity, and that worked in with my sort of childhood and everything, was an appreciation for the natural world. So I find it personally easier to go and pray in a forest or a woodland or a field than I do in a little room with half a dozen other people. So it's finding that balance. And I think the other thing that always gets me is that I'm a firm believer that love tops everything. Love wins out in the end. And I have Christian friends and acquaintances who take a view that if you say love tops everything, love wins out, that you're actually condoning bad behavior, because you say, that's all right, because we love them anyway. So if they want to take drugs or get drunk every night, that's absolutely fine. We still love them. And it's not about condoning that behavior. It's about loving them and hoping that they will see the love of God from that, so that they want to change. And it's things like that. It's finding that way through the Bible that makes sense to me. And that other side of it does make sense to other people. So I guess we'll find out one day who's right and who's wrong.
We could often learn from one another as well, can't we? We're looking at, I think if any of us think we understand God fully, we're probably deluding ourselves greatly. So yeah, so sharing experiences, and just thinking a bit about that, and then your current role, or the role that most of us are aware of you in this pioneer missioner role. So how do you see your journey thus far and your role? You know, do you, I'm assuming there's some interlapping of that. So could you talk to us a bit about how you see that, you know, what you bring and what the role is, and how you kind of...
Yeah, I think the one thing that was explained to me about the role at the start was we're looking for someone to bring fresh ideas and new ideas. And if someone comes to you with a fresh idea, someone who won't shut that down and go, no, we don't do that. We've never done that. And we're not ever going to do that. So I've come to it with an incredibly open mind. And no doubt, like yourself in your current role, I've seen church done in an awful lot of ways. I mean, I've visited Forest Church. I've seen a lot of one-to-one discipleship, all sorts of things that goes on. So having come to it late, having had a broad understanding of a lot of other religions and other things as well, and the various different routes that people have taken within the Christian faith, I don't look at it that anything is necessarily off limits. So if someone comes to me and says, I want to do a heavy metal service once a month, my response is going to be, great, how are we going to make that work? What can I do to help you get that off the ground? Because although I don't particularly care for heavy metal these days, it's another way to connect with people. I mean, for me, the whole thing has always, I'd say in some respects, my whole faith is based around that meeting Jesus had with the Sumerian woman at the well. Because the more you read into that, the more you discover, the more depth you discover to it. So not only does he sit out in the midday sun and meet with a Sumerian woman who is someone that, as a Jew, he would not normally have had any connection with, but he meets with a Sumerian woman who has to wait until midday to go to the well because she's such an outcast even within her own society. And it's just layer upon layer of that. So it's never writing someone off. I mean, there are people that I have massive disagreements with theologically, but I can look at them and I can go, okay, I don't agree with them about that, and that, but I've seen what they've done with that person, how they brought that person on, the difference they've made in that person's life. So I'll support them in that. And that's largely what I've brought across, because the missioner role in this situation is to support and encourage people to do outreach, mission, evangelism, whatever they want to call it. Not to do it for them, but to get them into a place where they can comfortably and happily get out and do it themselves. So I can't afford to go, oh, well, I really don't like the idea of a book club in Costa. That sounds like a bad idea. I have to look at it and go, yeah, that could work for that group of people. How can we make it work? And that's what I keep trying to push across the circuit. I mean, this year has been a massive disappointment in a lot of ways, because after last year, there were a lot of people who were keen to take the prayer caravan or mini versions of the elemental tent to various fetes and carnivals and things that were happening around the circuit. And things were moving in the right direction. And it's now trying to keep this up, keep this momentum up at a distance. And it can feel a little difficult at times, but there are people within the circuit who are still keen to go as soon as they're released and get moving on things like that. But I think that's the main thing. It's that willingness to entertain any idea, but also the willingness to bring it back in and suggest changes to it and look at ways to make it actually work.
Yeah. I'm just looking behind you on your wall. I don't know whether that's one of your pictures or whether that's
No, it's a Mark Rothko.
Art is a big part of your life as well, and you know, one of the things we've seen you do, some of us at the Elemental Tent, is use your drawings in a ministry and a prophetic way. So you're quite used to, in some ways, taking what to some of us might appear to be a fairly weird idea, if I can say that, and using that. So so in final, let's finish. Art is important to you. So how, obviously the prophetic art is something we've seen you do. How else is there other ways you use art within your faith?
I mean, since I was 7 and I decided I wanted to learn to draw, art has been a key part of everything I've done. I mean, within my faith, it's taken me in all sorts of directions, from storytelling and puppetry to animation. I was asked recently by my church to do a talk, for a children's talk for them, and I thought, right, well, I need some way to keep this interesting rather than just me staring at the camera and talking to people. So I did a little cutout animation to go with it, and then I got one of our puppets out and had the puppet discussing things with me. We were talking about community engagement, and both me and the puppet just kind of looked at each other and went because it sounds so boring, but then you put it into a context and lift it up again. But things like that, the animation, I've done a lot of, not so much recently, but I've done a lot of prophetic artwork, and what I'm trying to get back into now is creative prayer. So that's a great way to use art, because you're praying, but you're also listening to God, and you're just drawing, and it focuses and clears the mind and allows you to actually listen to what God's saying and focus on what you're praying about. So yeah, it does tend to become part of everything that I do, pretty much.
And here lies a slight difference between every person sees things differently. So you say you're empty your mind when you're thinking art, whereas if I think art, my mind overloads with fear and anxiety.
That's because you're thinking about it.
Yeah. So
there is a meditative approach to creative art, in that what you do is you basically sit down with a piece of paper and some colored pencils and you doodle. It's literally just doodling. It's something to keep your hands busy so that you're not fiddling with your phone or looking for something else to do, and you're just doodling and focusing on praying. And usually when I've run sessions of that, I've done it by having people do that while I read a passage from the Bible. So most recent one was Jesus calling his disciples. So I read that, then we played some quiet music in the background while people just prayed and doodled, and there's some great pictures come out of it. And people get very worried because the best they can draw is a stick figure. And as with prophetic art, it's not about the art itself. It's about providing a visual record of what God is saying, and you can do that with stick figures and a stick boat as easily as you can with 20 hours worth of oil painting. Mm-hmm. And it's still something people can pick up and take away with them.
So again, I know you'll be more than happy to explain and take people through more of that journey and share more of that. And I know you're also very keen to hear what other people's weird and wonderful ideas are for mission as we move in this semi-lockdown period and into hopefully more freedoms again. So, and it reminded me, you were talking about this love wins, and one of John Wesley's thoughts is about grace, that God loves everybody before they even are aware of that, and we're there trying to link them to that grace, trying to help them see that they are loved. So yeah, thank you, Pete, for sharing with us today and telling us much more about your life and your story. And I know that you're going to be more involved in these testimony times going forward. So thank you for joining with us and for spending time with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. And if you're watching this, be aware I may be knocking on your door, emailing you, suggesting you come and join me for a conversation.